We live in a culture that allows us to define and redefine everything. Live your truth. You do you. Whatever makes you comfortable. These are phrases that enforce the idea that we have the power to define the stuff we see and experience for ourselves. We often apply this same concept to the person of Jesus. We attempt to define Jesus by what makes us comfortable. We define Jesus in a way that fits him into our life without the need for sacrifice, discomfort, or conflict. But what if, by choosing to define Jesus our own way, we actually don't get to know the real Jesus? We don't actually experience the riches of who he is. The fullness of life in him and the changes he brings are never fully realized in our life. But what does Jesus say about himself? What if we let him shape our definition of who he is? I am the light of the world. I am the good shepherd. I am the way and the truth and the life. As we search and long for clarity, guidance, truth, Jesus boldly declares, I am.
So we've all had hardship, right? A moment of crisis or of loss, feelings of frustration or being overwhelmed. And my guess is as I talk about those things, you can think of one or maybe many situations that would kind of qualify in any of those categories. A fractured relationship, stress about school or a job, questions looming about what comes after high school, family conflict with mom or dad or siblings, the loss of someone you love. All of us, life is fraught. It's filled with things that are hard, things that are difficult, things that produce angst in us. And it poses the question, when life gets difficult, where do we turn? Who do we look to, or what do we look to for guidance? What voices do we hear in those moments that we hope will attend to the needs that we have? It's probably like a hobby, right? For many of you guys, you'd say, man, it's something I enjoy doing. It's hanging out with friends. When life gets really hard, I need to go hang out with my friends. For some of you guys, it's music, right? When I experience loss or grief, I need to listen to a particular song or an artist, and I can get lost in their music. Or it's movies, or it's social media, or it's whatever. There's a research company we've talked about here called Barna, and they did a study on this years ago, and they asked teenagers, like, where do you guys go for help in these moments? Dads were down on the list at like number 25. Moms were somewhere around like number 11, and friends and music sat near the top of that list. I think that's telling, right? It's telling about the things that we find most accessible, the things that we are most prone to running to in our moments of need and of crisis. But Jesus makes a statement about himself. And that's what we're doing. Those are what we're looking at over the next few weeks together. We're looking at statements that Jesus makes about himself. And the one we're going to look at today is one where he kind of invites us to consider that maybe he is the best option for us. In moments of crisis, as great as mom or dad or music or friends might be, Jesus offers himself as the best option for us. So if you have a Bible, I encourage you to open to John chapter 10, and we're going to read in there together. Again, over the course of this series, we're looking at 3 I am statements that Jesus makes. 3 statements that Jesus makes when he gets to define himself for us. And we're holding our hands open-handedly when we think about the ways we define Jesus. And we're saying, if there's a better way to think about you, Jesus, if there's a better way to know you or understand you, I want to receive that from you over the course of this series. And so last week we looked at the statement that Jesus made when he says, I'm the light of the world. And what it means to have the light that Jesus offers is it's to have life, to have direction, to have guidance, to have the presence of God in your life. This week we come across a statement that Jesus makes in John chapter 10. It's verses 11 through 14. It says this, I am the good shepherd, and the good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. The hired hand is not the shepherd, and he does not own the sheep. But when he sees the wolf coming, he abandons the sheep and runs away. Then the wolf attacks the flock and scatters it. The man runs away because he's a hired hand, and he cares nothing for the sheep. But I am the good shepherd. I know my sheep, and my sheep know me. Whenever we talk about sheep and shepherds in the 21st century, my guess is that kind of language, that kind of story, really probably gets lost on most of us. I assume, and I could be wrong, sir. If I'm wrong, feel free to shoot me a note and let me know. But I'm assuming nobody here that's listening to this is a shepherd or a sheep farmer. And in fact, even if you were, my guess is it looks drastically different today than it did when Jesus was talking about this, when he used this illustration. But he's talking to a group of people who would have been wildly familiar with the concept of sheep and shepherding and the role that each of those two things played in their everyday life. In fact, the region that Jesus would have been talking in was right on the edge of the desert. And during certain months of the year, this desert would actually produce all sorts of vegetation, and shepherds would lead their sheep out there to feast on it, and then they'd move them from place to place as the vegetation waxed and waned throughout the year. And one of the things that I think is important for us to understand is that this relationship with sheep and shepherd is that sheep are utterly dependent on the shepherd. In fact, I talked about this a couple years ago in a message that we got to share with you guys, that sheep are like next level stupid. So much so that a shepherd actually has to bring a sheep. If they've brought them to a pasture and they eat all of the grass, the sheep will stay there and starve to death. And so the shepherd has to bring them to a new place and say, look, there's grass over here that you can eat. But Jesus paints a different picture. He's not painting a picture of dumb sheep. He's painting a picture of sheep in danger. And he kind of compares and contrasts himself as the good shepherd to the hired hand. And Jesus is saying that when a wolf comes, I'm going to stick there. I'm going to stay there. I'm going to defend my sheep because I care about them. Somebody else who's not the shepherd, who's just somebody that the shepherd maybe hired out to come and take care of some sheep for a day or whatever, those aren't his sheep. He doesn't care. He's more concerned about his own life, his own safety, his own protection. He doesn't care that the sheep are in trouble. So, back to the original question that we asked. When you think about hardship, pain, loss, difficulty, moments of crisis, the wolves, so to speak, who's got your back in those moments? Where do you turn to when a wolf breaks into the sheep pen, so to speak, and is coming after you? Who are you counting on? Jesus says, I'm the only one that you can fully count on. I am the constant. I am the good shepherd who will lay down my life for my sheep. Jesus is, with that statement, kind of foreshadowing his ultimate crucifixion, him dying on the cross for the sins of the world, the wolves that came after our souls, that try to pull us away from God. Jesus says, I'm willing to die to defeat that wolf so that my people are safe, so they can have life, so they can know God, be free from sin. But Jesus is not only the good shepherd who defeated sin, he's the good shepherd who stays with us all throughout our lives. And when hard times arise, he's the one that's present. He's the one that's constant. Jesus never leaves, never forsakes us, never worried about his own gain, his own safety, his own well-being. He says, I'm willing to lay down my life to sacrifice for my sheep. How quick are we to take him up on that, though? You know, he closes this section out and he says, I'm the good shepherd. I know my sheep. Jesus is saying, I know you. I see you. I see what you're going through. I hear the heartache you're expressing. I see it, and I'm with you in it. I know my sheep. And he follows it up and says, and my sheep know me. Which begs the question, do I know the voice of the good shepherd? Do I know the voice of Jesus? When I'm in the middle of chaos and strife, can I listen for the voice of Jesus? You know, shepherds back in Jesus' day, many of them used to carry around a small flute, right? And so they would play a song or play a sequence of notes, and the sheep would know that's my shepherd. And so in moments of chaos, of crazy, it's not only the shepherd's voice that the sheep might be listening to, but it's that note, it's that tone that, now I know where safety is. I know who's got my back. I know who's going to defeat this wolf for me, defend me against this wolf. Do you know the voice of Jesus? It begs the question, how do I get to know that? Well, honestly, the answer to that's really simple. How does a sheep get to know the sound of the shepherd's flute? By listening to it. By being in proximity to the good shepherd. How often are you opening up God's word to hear the voice of Jesus spoken to you? Do you pray and say, God, speak to me. I want to hear from you. I want to know your voice. Are you surrounding yourself with other people who are listening for the voice of Jesus in their own life and in your life, who can point it out and say, I think Jesus might be talking to you right here, or Jesus has this truth to say about you or about your situation and your circumstance? If I'm not spending time with the Good Shepherd, then I will never hear the Good Shepherd's voice. Instead, I'll replace his voice with the voices of thousands of other voices, right? Music, movies, television, TikTok, podcasts, any number of things. And I'm not saying any of those things are bad. I'm not here to demonize those things. But I'm saying when life gets really hard, are we sure we can count on those things? When wolves are coming in, are we sure that those things will stick with us and defend us? I don't know about you, but I've experienced the letdown of those things time and time again. I turn to a song that once meant something to me, and in a moment of need, it just doesn't speak to me anymore. I went to a friend who I could always count on, but in a moment of crisis, they weren't there. What do I do then? Oftentimes we're left optionless, it can feel like. Jesus says, I'm with you. I'm the Good Shepherd. I'll never leave you, never forsake you. I know you. I see you. I hear you. Do you hear me? Do you trust me? Do you believe that I'm with you in the midst of this trial, in the midst of this hardship? When Jesus says, I am the Good Shepherd, he's saying, I'm with you and I'm for you and I will never leave you. And friends, that's a truth that I hope resonates in your heart. I hope it's something that when you hear that fills you with great joy. I hope it's something that fills you with a great deal of gratitude that there is somebody who loves you. And when the rest of the world fails you, Jesus says, I won't. When life is hard, when you feel in danger, I'm there. And I would lay down my life for you. And he did. So as you guys go into your community group discussions, I'd love for you to just park on this concept, park on this idea. What does it look like to see Jesus as the Good Shepherd? You know, throughout this passage, he talks about the idea of false shepherds, those false voices. And not only is it worth us considering what it looks like to trust Jesus as the Good Shepherd, but it's worth us considering what are the false shepherds that we're following after right now? What are those things in our lives that we turn to instead of Jesus? I want you guys to have honest discussion about that, conversations about that, because if those false shepherds don't echo the voice of Jesus, don't point you to the Good Shepherd, then they're probably not worth following. They're probably not worth chasing. They're certainly not worth counting on. Jesus says, I'm the Good Shepherd. I'm with you, and I'm for you. Rest in that truth together, and rest in it this week as you go about your life. Cling to the truth that Jesus is for you, and he's with you. Have a great night, guys.